It's ding ding, two men in a ring. We put pride in your stride and a quiver in your liver. You want 'em, we've got 'em, coming to you. Loud and proud, he's the biggest, he's the baddest. It's Mr. Gavin Davis on the Gavin Davis Podcast Show.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Gavin Davis Podcast with my co-host, Dave Bruff. Tonight, we've got a very, very important guest on the show, great friend of mine. This guest has had 20 professional MMA fights. He is currently signed to Cage Warriors. He is the head coach at IPC, Inspire Performance Center in Wrexham. He has cystic fibrosis and is a cystic fibrosis fundraiser and campaigner. He is also a cancer survivor and a real-life superhero. So I want to welcome to the podcast my friend, Mr. Aaron Aby. Aaron, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks for having me, guys. Hope you guys are good.
Brilliant. We got a lot of questions to get through. We might need about 10 hours, but I know your schedule's busy, so we're going to crack on, okay? So, shooting straight from the hip, let's discuss your sporting background as a child, and then dealing with cystic fibrosis, and then how you got into MMA around the age of 15.
Yeah.
Okay, mate.
Okay. So obviously, I was born with cystic fibrosis, so it was something that I knew about from birth and everything, and growing up, and when I was born with cystic fibrosis, the life expectancy was 16. The advice was a bit different back then to what it is now. Like, we were told not to exercise because our lungs wouldn't be able to cope with it. Stay away from much mixing and being out in the cold and everything. But my mum and dad, they took a different approach to bringing me up, and basically said they were going to let me live a normal childhood the best as I could. So I was involved in sports from a young age, and almost went what they're telling people now to do with kids with cystic fibrosis, I was doing back then, taking part in all the sports I could, training, working the lungs, engaging in physical activity, and just being a normal child growing up. Where I played sports, football mainly, but cross country, athletics, and everything growing up as a kid.
Yeah, and you played high level football as well.
Yeah, I played as a Welsh schoolboy, at a good level, and I was at pro professional clubs from the age of 11, 12, or all the way up to 18. So yeah, I was playing at a good level.
Yeah. So when I first met you, you were training in Bradley Activate there, and you were training with your uncle Julian, who had tons of experience in wrestling and different stuff, and he had Nick Jones and Gareth Roberts and all that. When we first met, one thing I massively noticed about yourself was your cardio output. Now, I've always had quite good cardio, but your cardio was as good, if not better, than mine. That goes to show the level of athleticism that you've got and how much you've really worked at this over the years. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I was an active kid, but I was active because of the work I was doing. I would get up before school and go for runs from a young age, and made sure when I played football, I'd try and cover every blade of grass, and cross country, bleep tests. I was always working hard, and I think I was fortunate. When my dad growing up, he would take me running up hills and stuff, and I'd grow up watching the Rocky and Karate Kid films. So as a young age, I did have good cardio, and I used to hold the school 1500-meter record and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was something I did pride myself on, and still do now, really, because for me that was almost if I had healthy lungs, I felt like I was healthy, and cystic fibrosis wasn't beating me. Yeah. So it was a way for me to train my lungs and make them better, like motivation to do that, but also for me to like prove I was like beating cystic fibrosis at the time growing up as a kid.
Yeah. Now I know you're a few years younger than me, but one thing I distinctly remember about meeting you was when I came over from like traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu and I started cross training, I started dabbling in with the wrestling and all that, how your grounding from your uncle and the lads that you were training with, you were miles ahead of me with like overall MMA game plans, everything that, was that getting pumped in from Julian and your dad and just Nick and all the lads, or was that something that you brought as well?
I would say mainly Julian. When I started, he started taking a class for cystic fibrosis, so
yeah,
all like the funds were going to cystic fibrosis. So I started going there with my dad, but I feel like obviously you come from a more traditional background where I was almost like put straight into mixed martial arts. Obviously, the training was separate back then, where it was like ground this day, striking this day, wrestling this day. But it was still like I was still training to be a mixed martial arts fighter back then, whereas like people had still come from boxing or kickboxing, jiu-jitsu and everything. But I feel like a lot of my training back then was just like reps, getting the reps in, repetitions in the mixed martial arts stuff. And I think I had quite a good fighting IQ.
Yeah, you did.
Even back then of like, I still do it now, but back then I'd study fighters, different fighters, how they would win fights, how they would lose. And even back then I'd be like, oh, how would I beat me if I was going against me? So I think I like a good fighting IQ with that, and I think it's something I've progressed throughout my career with and developed and everything. But yeah, I think I was like probably one of the first to start training mixed martial arts for mixed martial arts rather than coming from a separate background.
Yeah, I remember you being really switched on, and I remember thinking to myself, I need to be doing what he's doing, and I need to be looking at him and the people he's got round him if I'm gonna start developing in this. What I want to do, I want to bring Dave in.
Yeah.
Hey, Aaron.
Dave, you okay?
You're great, thanks. Yeah, really inspirational story, Aaron. I wonder if you could expand a bit on how having cystic fibrosis impacted your training or preparation for MMA.
I would almost try and like treat myself as normal growing up. The thing I maybe struggled with, or not struggled with, or had to adapt the more I got into it was like I couldn't overtrain. Because if I found myself overtraining, I was ill. And then if I was ill, like I wouldn't recover maybe from a cold or a cough like my other teammates were. So I just had to be smart with that, make sure I was like trying to look after my training, my sleep, and having good nutrition, because I didn't have the room for being lazy maybe that other people would do, or slacking like other people would do. So I think I had to just be more considerate and careful with everything I did like that in preparation up to the fight. But everything else, I would say I was pretty good with.
When you talk about the risk of infection, did that shape how you trained? Did you do anything in isolation, or were you just careful with your training partners?
Yeah, more so like when me and Gav started training back in the day, you didn't have like 20, 30 people to train with. So there would still only be 4 of us. So even if someone had the cough, I wouldn't really say, oh, I'm not rolling with you. Well, I'll go with that guy over there who hasn't got a cold or something. But it was more like, if I would make sure I got my sleep in, and if I had a bad night's sleep, I'd think, oh, my immune system's going to be a bit weaker today. Maybe I'll just do a lighter session. Or, if I had 3 or 4 hard days in a row and I was feeling tired, I'd be like, right, maybe I'll have to take today off. It was more like smart decisions like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could just expand a bit. I mean, you mentioned before about game plans and your fight IQ. Maybe you could expand a little bit. Were you analyzing your opponents and preparing how you would fight them, or did you go in with a pretty clear strategy of just how you were going to deliver a fight?
I would mainly and still do base my game plans around me, especially coming up to a fight with a certain opponent. You can only control what I can control. But like out of a fight camp, if I had time off, I'd be like, right, if I was fighting against me, how would I beat me? Here. I need to work on these things. So I'd work on them things, and then coming up to a fight, I'd be like, right, how am I going to beat this guy? I need to work on this, and they're what I would focus on. So I'd say I'd take maybe that approach out of fight camp. Like, where do I need to work on? These are those areas. How can I get better at? That's what I'm going to do. But then into the fight, it would always be how I'm going to win the fight. Where am I going to expose? What am I going to look to do in this fight?
Was there any particular aspect of, I mean, do you prefer striking or grappling, and would your game plan kind of favor a particular strength you had?
I would say I am more of a wrestler grappler, but I am quite well rounded. That I feel like I can strike with everyone. I can compete in the wrestling with everyone and go to the ground. Because like I said earlier to Gav, I was like brought up straight away as being a mixed martial artist. I didn't come from like a traditional background in any specific aspect. I was like straight into it as a complete whole. So I feel like obviously as I've developed and trained with a lot of good grapplers over time, that is something that maybe has led the way. But I do feel like I'm capable enough to compete on the feet as well with the top guys in my weight.
One thing I just want to ask, Aaron, it's just popped into my mind actually. You fight a flyweight now, 57 kilo.
Yeah. Your
first semi-pro in Wrexham, what weight were you at then? I've got it in my head you were around 66, 67.
Yeah, it was. So that was my first semi-pro fight, but do you remember the old amateur rules with no headshots and grappling?
Yeah.
There was no weight classes above 70 kilogram.
Right.
So when I was like first started training and competing, that was like the weight class I was aiming for. So I was like trying to bulk up to it and keep myself around that weight, because like if you remember back in the UFC, there was no under 70 kilogram. Everyone
there was no bantamweight or nothing.
No, everyone competing was in the WEC and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was obviously trying to get myself up a lot heavier back then, and I think my first semi-pro, what you said, was at 66, mate. You're right.
Yeah. Dave, have you got anything else for Aaron on that topic before we move on, mate?
No, let's move on, Gav.
Okay, so I've got it here, Aaron, that you turned pro in 2013. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and literally for everyone listening at home, I've got the list in front of me. It's like a who's who in Europe of like some of the names you've got. I'm going to shout some out, like Andy Young, Sam Creasy, Mick Gerard. You fought Missing twice. I fought Missing as well, and I lost to Missing. I'm gonna put something out there now, and I've just gone through your fight history yesterday, and what amazes me is that we're going to play a video in a minute, which is on Full Contact Contender. I want to give a shout out to Adam for letting us use the video on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And we'll put some positive reviews in the links as well. But of all the fights you've had at pro level, and I know this is at amateur and semi-pro as well, this fight that we're going to show is the only one that you've got stopped in. Okay. And this is a questionable stoppage anyway. Every other high-level mixed martial artist that you fought, you've lost on a decision. So that goes to prove just like not only the level you're at, but just how durable and how tough you are as well. Do you know what I mean? And the skill level that we're talking about here, because I know a lot of these lads, like Sam Creasy and that, and like he was Cage Warriors world champion at flyweight. So I think that's an amazing statistic to think that, on paper you've lost 6 fights, but 5 of them were decisions, and a lot of them were quite close. So I just wanted the viewers or the listeners to acknowledge that, to be aware of that. So out of all them fighters, and it could be amateur and semi-pro as well, but it doesn't really matter. Out of all them fighters that you fought, who would you say was your toughest fight and why?
Toughest or best is the question.
You go with it, mate. If you're happy with talking about the best, please talk about the best.
I think the best I would have to say is Sam Creasy.
Right? Yeah.
I thought with that fight, that was like when I was still gaining weight. So after chemotherapy and everything, I went down to 49 kilogram.
Right. Okay. I saw the photos, mate. You didn't look well, and obviously, you know what I mean. It's yeah.
So I was building weight up, and I remember when I fought Sam Creasy, I had breakfast. I'm weighed in under 57 still.
Yeah.
And he said to me that he'd woke up on the morning of the fight at 66 kilogram.
Yeah.
So I think obviously in that fight I gave up a lot of size, but I didn't feel I could really get into the fight.
Yeah.
Either, because he was just like controlling the tempo and the exchanges in that fight. I never felt like I was getting finished, but I felt like I was being controlled. Whereas in other fights I've had tougher fights where I maybe took a bit more damage, but I've always felt there's been opportunities I could have won the fight or time I was winning the fight.
Yeah.
So he would probably be my best, the best person I thought I would feel competitively. Toughest fight, obviously, I've had a couple of tough ones. I would say the one I maybe underperformed in was the Michelangelo Lipoli fight.
Okay, yeah. You just pause this, Dave.
He took my calf out within 10 seconds.
Right.
And it was hard to like move on it for the rest of the fight. So it ended up being a tougher fight, and one I like didn't get my distance going or anything, or didn't adapt.
Yeah.
Throughout the fight. So it's like depends on the question and the answer really to that.
Okay.
But Sam, I would say.
I saw Sam at Kev's before Christmas.
Yeah.
And he's walking around a touch lighter now. You said he's walking around 61, 62. He's dropped a bit of weight. He's just come off a loss. But yeah, when I watched that fight, you with him, he looked a lot bigger.
Yeah.
A lot bigger. If you're 66 the day before, you're probably still at 57, 58, yeah?
I woke up the morning of the fight still like 57.
Right, yeah. It's a big difference, mate. So what we're going to do, we're going to play this fight of you and Missing. This is the famous one. This is the first one before you beat him in the rematch. We're going to play it, and I'm going to pass you over to Dave, mate, okay?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, maybe Gav, you can talk through some of this. Oh, my video's going a bit funny. Hold on.
Yeah. Just looking at ranges at the moment, trying to feel each other out. And then there's a bit in here where Aaron shoots in for a takedown and gets him up against the cage.
I threw like a switch cross. And I remember I'd been drilling it up to the fight because I'd been away at Alpha Male at the time.
Yeah.
And it was something that we were having me work a lot. They were all working it back then. And my plan for this fight was to actually stand a bit more.
Yeah.
But when I've thrown the switch cross, I've like closed the distance quite well and ended up on a takedown.
Yeah.
And I remember being on the cage now and just thinking, oh, you were going to stand. And I was like, but you're in here. And I'm thinking too much instead of either finishing the takedown or disengaging.
Yeah. Did them elbows, did you catch you on the temple, any of them? Were you slightly out there, or was it a balance thing?
Always there, mate. And the canvas was slippy as well.
Right.
So like when I've tried to get up, and obviously I've had bit wobbly legs and I'm slipping on a slippy canvas. In hindsight, maybe I should have just like sat on my bum for a little bit.
Yeah.
Like reset the situation, let him come to me rather than like have that fighter's mindset of like trying to get back up straight away. But even here, like I'm pretty settled and
Yeah, you
composed.
recover.
I
Yeah.
don't like feel like I'm being close to being finished. But I remember at the time the ref said he had to stop the fight because my ear was in half.
Right.
So I ended up like he was saying like, you know, if you carry on, you're gonna lose your ear and stuff. That's why I'm protesting, like saying,
Yeah. The guillotine, you get out the guillotine.
I say like I'm fine to carry on and stuff. But I think like my problem with this fight was the decision making when I managed to close the distance.
Okay. There is a bit in this, there is a point in this fight, and I'll tell you when you come to it where I would have stopped the fight. It's not
Yeah.
yet, but I'll tell you. Dave, have you got a question for Aaron while we're watching the fight, mate?
It's yeah. I'm just so Aaron. It looks like you know you're taking a lot of punishment here. Are you feeling? Are any of these blows concussive?
It's that long ago. It's hard for me to like be exact with it. But I remember like I'm protesting the stoppage at the end of it, and I'm always feel like I'm like working to do the right things when I'm on the bottom. Like now, I haven't watched this fight back in ages, but I'm like trying to come up on my underhook here. I'm obviously getting face planted a little bit, and
Here, this is where I'd have stopped it, where you turn there. I would
Yeah.
have turned there. But then a split second after, see, now you can argue now you're all right.
yeah, because
You know
now
what I mean?
again I'm getting back on the underhook and stuff, and so I think that there is a point I am rocked, but
Yeah.
I'm not completely out of it. And for me, like I'm when I'm in there, it's like you're gonna have to kill me to get me out of it. I'd like to
Yeah,
think
yeah.
even
Yeah.
there when it takes my back, I'm still fighting the hands and stuff where maybe a lot of people would just give him the rear naked choke. But
Oh no,
that's
that's one thing about us Wrexham lads. There's no quitting us.
yeah,
We'll,
so
we'll say that, like.
yes, that's
But
just
yeah,
not
that's the spot there where I would have said, yeah, okay, I'll stop. But as I say, a split. Nah, this is where you slip as well.
yeah.
Were your legs gone anyway, or was it pure slippery?
I think it's a bit of both, mate.
Yeah.
It's a bit of both.
Do
Like,
you know what I think as well? I think that because I watched this back the other night in prep for this interview, yeah, and I think if you just pause it, please, there, Dave. If you watch that first 3 minutes, you never ever settled on your feet. And I
Yeah.
think you've been on your back, you're fighting, you're trying to get underhooks, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. And then when you do stand up, it's like you haven't stood up in like 10 years because you've been on your back fighting for your life for 3 minutes. And then you've got a little bit of jelly in your legs, and then it's just hard, you know what I mean? On top of slipping.
Yeah, I think as well, mate. Like I said to you at the start,
Yeah.
if I sit on my bum a little bit instead of trying to stand up,
Yeah.
because I've like kicked him off me, he's got up and like stood up as in to like get back up onto the feet. But maybe I should have sat there a little bit, like regained where I was and stuff, or
Yeah.
let back to me. And that stuff maybe I've had to like think about over time as well.
Yeah.
After, like
Hindsight, innit?
yeah,
Dave, if you just go back 40 seconds on that and just replay it, please, because I just want to make one more point on this. So there, mate, just there, that's fine. So when you're, as I say, like you're defending yourself, you're fine, totally fine. And then now when he breaks off here, if you would have done a Nate Diaz there, not rushed, right?
yeah.
If you'd have just sat there and had 5-6 seconds, that would have been a different fight. That.
Yeah, you know, but it would have not been stopped at least there. Maybe got to the end of the round and reset and everything. And I think that's something like I've learned from in time and stuff, and something that I like took on throughout the rest of my career and my coaching career. You know,
Could I ask you, Aaron, what at that when you got back up on your feet? Obviously, the referee's having a close look, but in your mind, are you still thinking about winning this fight? Are you still thinking about how you're going to get back into it? I mean,
100%. Yeah, 100%. Like when the ref's trying to stop it, I'm like, I'm fine, and I'm trying to tell him I slipped. I was slipping on the blood. But when he's probably talking to me there, you can see he's looking at my ear.
Yeah, but to be fair, that's the doctor's decision. That he wants to bring the doctor in for that, or the paramedics.
Yeah.
Missing stopped the fight. Really, the referee. I think the referee's a little bit poor in his judgment making here.
Yeah, like obviously Missing's like walked off and celebrated and everything, but yeah, it's one of them. You could argue you're either way.
Yeah.
Some people will tell you it should have been stopped earlier. Some people will say it shouldn't have been stopped. It's just one of those things that's down to a matter of opinion at the end of the day. And obviously, being a fighter, you don't want it to be stopped.
Does a fighter ever have a point in a contest where they want the fight to stop? Or do you ever actually feel in danger, or is it do you just accept the risks of
I think
what
some
could
fighters
potentially
do.
happen?
I think some fighters do, Dave. Like I watch some fights, and you can see when people quit, and they like maybe turn up or turn over or turn their back or they wave their own fight off and stuff. Again, I think it depends on the situation and who you are as an individual. So I definitely think some people do, but again, I think it's based on the individual and the situation.
Yeah. So let's fast forward from this fight. Dave, do you wanna take that fight off? And as I say, thank you to Full Contact Contender for allowing us to show that footage of Aaron's fight. So then you go into a rematch with Missing, which is, I believe, 3 years later. Yeah.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
Obviously, that was a big fight and a lot of animosity going into that fight. I remember, like, yeah, I think he ended up calling me out because I'd gone on a few wins since him, and I was on ACB and stuff.
Yeah.
And saying that like he was going to retire me because I had cystic fibrosis, and said a few things about that, which obviously is motivating for me. But it ended up being like a more bad words said from him since then. Like obviously it's a different situation now. I've been on his podcasts and stuff and everything, but you know he said some things that he says he shouldn't have said and everything. So I'm like going in motivated to like prove a point for me and everyone else with cystic fibrosis and stuff. I ended up selling like over 200 tickets for that fight, which was in Sheffield, so obviously not close to Wrexham, but I think that he did a lot of the selling the tickets for me. In hindsight, obviously that was the latest loss, and one that would been replayed and had millions of views on UFC Fight Pass and all over YouTube and everything, and one I still get tagged in now to this day. So I just wanted to rewrite it because, as well, the biggest thing for me with that fight is I didn't feel like I performed as I should. I did feel like I was better than Danny Missing at the time of that fight, and I had a lot more in there. And obviously, I've again just made an error when I've entered in and closed that distance to even not finish the takedown or disengage and get back to the striking, which ended up causing me problems and making the fight end up the way it did. So it was good to get that one back.
Dave, you got anything for Aaron?
No, not in the fight. No, I think that's covered it, Gav.
So I know exactly what you mean there, because when I fought Missing in 2012, I felt that I was having good success in that fight with the leg kicks, caught him with a few good strikes as well. And I was disappointed with my stoppage against Missing, to be fair. I thought it was a poor stoppage. He did catch me, but I was actively defending myself when he came down into my guard, and I thought the referee was very quick on stopping it. So I know exactly what you mean. You want that rematch to prove that you're better than that, don't you? You know?
Yeah, and obviously with the things that are being said as well.
Yeah, terrible. Yeah,
because I do understand sometimes it's not the best fighter who wins on the night; it's the fighter who makes the best decisions. And I understand like the more pro fights you've had, like I've had like 36 fights now, amateur, and professional, and you know it's decision making sometimes on the night or what version of yourself turns up. So I understand there's going to be nights you come out on top, and nights that you don't. But yeah, it was just like everything that was said before it and the build up to it, and with the replays and stuff, it was good to get that back and show everyone.
Yeah. See,
Maybe I could just ask a question on it.
Yeah, go on,
actually,
Dave.
Gab.
Yeah.
So when you've had a contest, and you talk about game plans before, do you ever go back and analyze the game plan you had and work out whether it was the right one or the wrong one, or
100%. Always got to like do reflective practice, even on the game plan, but training up to the fight. How were you training up to the fight? Your training schedule, what you're working in training. Like you do that with your coaching team and everything, and because you always want to be better. Even if you win a fight, you still reflect on it. Like people say, win or learn, but for me, it's just learn. You can, you don't win or learn. You should just learn, whether you win or you lose. You always want to be reflecting on stuff, and I think that that's one of maybe the things what I'm doing now as a coach is I'm like passing on that experience and taking away a lot of the mistakes I made for my guys and giving them the best chance. I always like when I get my fighters and stuff, I always think, right, I want to get them better than I was in less time than it took me by taking away those mistakes and all the stuff I've reflected on throughout my career.
So going into the second missing fight, you're prepped, you're ready to go. You get the win. You get a very good win. I watched the fight, thought it was brilliant. Then you have to tackle your biggest problem in life, all right? The cancer. Was it starting to affect you when you were training for that fight, or was it post the fight? When did you start having issues, and what were the issues, mate?
No, I've been to the hospital a couple of times up to the fight,
Right.
with pains in stomach and back. I remember, like at first time they told me I had a water infection.
Right.
Give me some antibiotics, but I didn't take them because I didn't like taking antibiotics.
Yeah.
Especially in a fight camp. So I didn't take them. And then I went sparring to a boxing gym. Carl Prince took me to in Manchester. And on the way home, I remember I had to pull over and I rung him. I was like, oh, did I take a low blow? And he's
Right.
like, not that I think. And I was like, oh, I've got massive pain here, like in me nuts and in me back. And I'm struggling to drive. And he was like, I don't think so, mate. He was like, see how you are. So I managed to get home and stuff. And I went to the gym because I was coaching some privates and then I was coaching a class. And I remember like while I was in the gym, I was sweating in pain. And just like not able to focus on what I was doing or concentrate. So then straight after the gym, I went back to the hospital and they said, "Oh, we'll take some bloods and send you off for some tests." So this was in the lead up to the fight, but they took bloods and they booked me in for blood, and they booked me in for tests, but they weren't until after the fight.
Right. Okay.
But they said, "Oh, go and take these antibiotics because it could just be a water infection, like we said last time, that you haven't dealt with." But in my head, I knew it wasn't a water infection. So I've left. But
Yeah.
like,
your body, like, yeah.
Yeah, and I know the pain's not of a water infection. So I've just left, and I've even thought maybe it's just like, maybe I have took a low blow, I haven't known, or maybe it's stress up to the fight combined with everything else. But because it wasn't like it was constant at the time, it was like a day on, couple of days off, a day on. So then after the fight, I've gone in for the tests and everything, and then that's when I've found out what it was.
Okay. And
So,
yeah, go on, Dave. Sorry, please.
well, I was just going to ask then, at that point, Aaron, were you thinking then that you might fight again, or were you thinking that the fight career's over, this you just got to deal with this? Like, what were you thinking?
I think I've always had, while it was going on, the hope of fighting again, the hope of living a normal life again. Because I think like you're gonna have tough times throughout your life. Like you know, in any journey. And I think sometimes hope gets you through it. Just that, like, me clinging on to something that I love so much and was so positive for me that it would happen again. Like that was the thing while I was going through the whole journey. You know, there was like times maybe I think I was gonna die, or you know, they told me to write a will for my parents and everything. But even when that was going on, I still had that hope that everything would be okay and that I'm gonna fight again and I'm gonna be back doing what I was doing before the cancer.
So how did you? I mean, I guess that so the treatment will have been successful. You've been given the all clear. Then, how do you rebuild your fight career? I mean, presumably the physical effects of that would have been enormous.
Yeah, I think I had a 18-month longer layoff. I was still managed to train little bits, but when the chemo started, rarely ever. I had 3 operations. One was a foot tumor removed from my stomach, which was a major operation, where a 13-inch mass was removed from my stomach. But like it's like any injury, you know, I'd had operations in the past before. Times I'd had to rebuild before. I put a plan in place. I put goals. I got the team around me, and I almost treated it like it was a fight camp. This is how I'm going to get back. This is what I need to do. These are my targets, and as I start ticking these targets off, I'll start getting closer towards fighting. But I'd always said this. I said this to the doctors. I said it to my family. I said, I'm not cured of cancer until I fight again.
Yeah.
I said, when I fight again, that's me being cured of cancer. So even though I'd had the all clear from the hospital, I hadn't cured myself until I'd stepped back in that cage.
I mean, it sounds like your approach as a fighter, your approach to fighting and being a fighter, helped you massively in your fight against cancer. It sounds like you just approached it like it was just another fight in the cage, so to speak.
I think having cystic fibrosis from a young age give me like an advantage to cope with adversity. I think there's a lot linked between fighting and life and fighting. They go hand in hand. And I always used to say everything I've been through before the cancer was almost like there to get me through the cancer. You know, like the cancer went and come back twice, and it was like dealing with that. It was like waiting for a surgeon. Only one surgeon in the UK could do the operation because of where the mass was in my stomach. It was right next to where the blood goes to and from the heart.
Right.
And I remember waiting for the surgeon to have an available date. The cancer come back, so then I had to go through chemotherapy again, and then my lung function went to like 30%, and they were like, if he has any more chemo, he's gonna die. So I was like, right, I might have like one or two sessions in the gym in between my chemo cycles. So what's gonna get me fittest the quickest? I'd like go on the rower, and I'd do like as much as I could on the rower. And then before the operation, I managed to get my lung function back up to 60-70%. Just through like getting in those sessions and taking control of what I could have. But I think I was almost fortunate that all the adversity I'd gone through earlier helped me get through that. But like I said, like about like anything, like I think with fighting or even stuff not like fighting, sport in general, and things that are going to give you problems, they relate to life, and then I think life also relates to fighting. Where you can compare and take things you've learned from both into the other.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else you want to touch with Aaron on that subject, Dave?
Just really, when you made it back into the ring or the cage, how did that feel?
That was still probably my proudest moment of my career, maybe my life. You know, I fought on UKFC on the night, and it was like a a smaller venue to like Cage Warriors and everything. But I remember like I stood on the balcony before I walked out, and I looked down and I could see like so many people have been on the cancer journey with me, like people who've like wiped up my sick, carried my oxygen tank, spent days with me on chemo. And I looked down and I thought, we did it. And I remember like, even though the fight was a draw, and in hindsight, probably too soon, I remember like that night looking back and thinking, we've done it, we're back. And we're going to progress through it. And I think I remember doing an interview after the fight, and the fight was a draw, and I won the first round, took a 10-8 in the second round, and won the third round. And I thought, my life's not meant to be like a fairy tale story.
Is
It's
this
not.
Is this against Daryl Grant? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
not meant to be a perfect story, but that fight sums up my life. Like being good, getting 10-8, 10-8 in the second round, and like my corner member saying like they were thinking we're gonna have to stop the fight here, but then I've gone and won the third. I've like found something within me to win that third, and the 10-8 back then was rare, so it's something you could maybe do now. But you know, I think me coming back and maybe just taking an easy opponent, because Daryl Grant, he was a good opponent, and like first fight back after cancer, that taking an easy opponent wasn't me. Coming back and getting an easy win wasn't me. Having a fairy tale story, it's just not meant to be what my life's about. But like I said earlier, if I can give people hope through my story and my journey, that means a lot more to me than getting a win on some night.
Definitely, yeah. We're gonna start looking at bringing the podcast to a close, Aaron, because I know you've got other stuff to do with your agenda and everything. So what I want to do is just talk about your work at IPC, what you're doing there, putting up a shout out through Rex, some of the good work that you're doing there, and any up and coming fights that you've got.
Oh, okay, mate. Well, at the moment, fights, I've got nothing confirmed.
Okay.
But I am looking. I'm in talks at the moment for a couple of dates. But I'm trying to get something sooner than the dates I've been offered.
Okay.
You know, I was staying ready since my last fight in November, trying to get some in December, January, still trying to get some in February or March. So nothing confirmed yet, but I am ready, and hopefully get something good coming up. Obviously, the sooner the better for me.
You're always ready. You're always ready to rumble.
Always ready, mate. And then obviously coaching and bringing up a great team.
Yeah.
In IPC at the moment.
Yeah. I see Ollie Morris is doing well there for you.
Ollie Morris is doing great, mate, and he's due to have a baby this week. Well,
right, okay.
Yep. So he'll be becoming a dad, but watching him, how he's grown as a person and a martial artist, and now like obviously he's an experienced fighter now, and one of the top 15 in the UK as an amateur, but he's taken on a bit of like a second coaching role after lost Julian, so he's taken in that role, and we got some good young and up and coming guys who are doing great. We've got the likes of Jordan Barton and Dakota Ditchiva coming down to train as well. So the gym's doing well, mate, and I'm enjoying being a part of it.
Alex still training?
Alex is not training anymore, mate, unfortunately.
He nearly broke my cheekbone, Dave.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, well, I went up there. We were doing some. He was fighting. Was it his first pro fight or something like that?
Yeah,
and we were doing a few rounds. It was like, I think it was like about 6 days before his fight, so it was his last proper session. And I went in for like a bit of a takedown, and then he just flying kneed me, and he caught me right. It was a beaut, Aaron, wasn't it?
An idiot, anyway.
I had to go to the hospital to check it wasn't broke. It was all right though.
But yeah, he was a great pro, mate. He was just
good, mate. He was good.
Yeah, he was good, and like he went 5-1 pro, but he had like business ventures elsewhere, and I think he enjoyed that more than the sport.
Okay.
which again is fair enough. He's into like his running now and everything. But we got some good guys coming through, mate. And I think like the gym will keep growing and expanding, and we'll see them develop as they go on.
Yeah, I'm sure it will under your guidance. I think it is difficult when you're training MMA, especially at a pro level, to have the time and the dedication. And then, we all know there's not a great deal of money coming in. It's not like you're earning £1 million a fight or anything like that to pay for your mortgage, pay your bills and everything. So to have the dedication to do that as a pro and keep going with it when the money isn't coming in and you start getting injuries and stuff, it's hard, man. It's difficult.
Yeah, mate. I just it is hard, but again, like for me, the stresses that come with the journey are worth it because it's a journey I'm passionate about, and I love it, there's stresses in any job you do in life, whether you're working, as a teacher in a school or as an office job, or there'll be stresses for you with this podcast, mate.
Oh yeah.
But as long as it's worth it,
mate,
and you love it,
go on, mate. Go on, finish. Please finish.
It'll be worth it for you. Like, and I'd rather have stresses about things I love and I'm passionate about than something I didn't give a shit about.
Yeah, mate. I've been more stressed the last 8 years, right, getting run ragged than I ever was when I was fighting.
Yeah,
seriously, I'm similar to you. I absolutely loved it. I actually loved the training for it as well. It just keeps you so fit. I just loved everything about it. Dave, is there anything you want to discuss with Aaron before we close, mate?
Just to say, Aaron, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. It's an inspirational story, and good luck with your future fights and your coaching.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and all the best with the podcast, guys. I know it's a new one, but I'm sure it'll do great, and you'll get some great guests and have some great stories.
Yeah, well, I'll be very surprised if there's any story more inspirational than yours. Thanks for coming on, mate. It's mine and Dave's honor to have you on. You're an absolute inspiration to not only Wrexham but North Wales and the UK, and keep doing what you're doing, mate. It's amazing. Your success in the cage is like unbelievable. So I wish you all the best for future fights. Obviously, we text and keep in touch anyway, but if you ever need anything, you know where I am, mate, for you. Okay?
Yeah. You two guys as well. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.